Hi all and welcome back. We're going to jump into July now. And we reported on a story that we covered previously, but it became more public, which has happened a lot this year. And it was reported that Congress has known for at least a decade that child porn trading on Defense Department computers was a problem. Military again. Immigration and Customs Enforcement identified 5,200 people subscribed to websites that were known to contain child pornography during the 2008 Project Flickr investigation, including hundreds of individuals affiliated with the Defense Department. Some of them were even that stupid they used their own government email address and military post boxes to register on the offending sites. Now, worryingly, dozens of them who were on these sites also possessed some form of security clearance. And the Defense Department's network ranked 19th out of 2,891 internet service providers for peer-to-peer trading of child porn in 2018. 19th. Worse for transferring child porn. The US Defense Department. In July, Randy Morgans did a fantastic no-holds-barred interview with Beth Martins that will have resonated with many who listened. And Randy spoke about his own trials and tribulations of overcoming personal conflicts and also attacks beyond your normal scope. The pressures of being a father, a husband, and his gender orientation, plus the general things that life throws up like finances, children, grandchildren, and fitting it all in, as time currently is being squeezed into much narrower spins. He spoke about the pressures to perform or to be available and the thinking process of why am I doing this is always bubbling just below the surface, he said. And I concurred with that thinking also. Only today, I turned on and then there was roughly a dozen questions fired at me within the first 5 minutes. And Randy said, particularly when you observe much stupidity and ignorance born out of social media chats or pages, it is frustrating more for us when we have put so much into it. The thinking that comes into your head, and I know Randy and Alan will agree with this, is why are we putting in so much effort and energy to save people, whereby our desire to save or help is more than the person does for themselves? Why shouldn't people fight as hard to save or help themselves? Was the question asked. And it's kind of bizarre in the extreme. And Randy spoke about the varying roles and the impacts that starts to bleed through into your private life, if you have any left, and then begins to consume it in many aspects. And I know that from personal experience. Essentially, this is a 24/7 job. And we have both wondered how many consider the work involved and how it impacts our daily lives, or do we actually have a life? Randy also went on to speak of the struggles of being a male these days, in particular the white male, We are by far the most marginalised, he said. And Beth asked, what can women do to help? Well, the answer would be to stop pushing them away. Stop being intimidating. Stop basing your love on how much they earn or will spend on you. Stop putting us down. Just because men did it in the past does not mean it has to be replicated. Look at how many single females there are. Look at how many single mothers there are. The figures are staggering. And at this point, it cannot be solely put down to the fact that all men are bastards and are only after one thing. The duality dance, the tags, the labels, the boxes, the roles, and the culture have all rendered the male and female into a mishmash of confusion, mistrust, distrust, fear-based and limiting. And this, as Randy says, has to be addressed by us all. Then the Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, chimed in early July and said that Facebook's FB-O plan to build a digital currency called Libra cannot go forward until serious concerns are addressed. They won't be. Comments that pressured the project and dented the price of the original cryptocurrency Bitcoin. And it was fairly strong comments from what is said to be the most powerful US financial regulator, underscored the growing regulatory hurdles facing the proposed cryptocurrency, which has drawn scrutiny from policymakers globally. I wonder why. And he said, Libra raises many serious concerns regarding privacy, money laundering, consumer protection, and financial stability. New boss, same as the old boss then. They're not concerned about money laundering when Mnuchin's sending American money to fake Chinese elders. Or Obama's sending, 1.8 billion in cash to Iran. You know, those nasty boogeymen from Iran. Then we posted this as a heads up. Janet Yellen, Michael Cohen, Chuck Schumer, Stephen Munchkin, Jared Kushner and Ivanka, Ruth Ginsburg, Kagan and Breyer, who are all judges, Stephen Miller, Rod Rosenstein, Jake Tapper. Interesting list of names, most, if not all, involved in some way to do with the Mueller investigation. But that was not why I brought up those names in this piece. Those names were listed in the Jerusalem Post in July as some of the world's top 50 Jewish people of influence. And I said there is a connection, and that is why I put it in the intel. The G20 rejected Bitcoin as the reserve currency. European central bank stated it's not a currency. Neither is the dollar. Well, it is. It's not real. And even the Fed rejected it. Why? Because, as I stated in the Clowns in Panic show, which we've now done, they are being cut out of the financial system for a higher end game, dominated by high end billionaires, not millionaires. And Kim reported that we can confirm that several of the former Federal Reserve board members were coming forward looking for a golden parachute, a personal payout in turn for resigning from the Fed en masse. then we started warning about AI. Timnit Gebru, a computer scientist and technical co-lead of GoOgle's ethical artificial intelligence team, has shown that facial recognition has greater difficulty differentiating between men and women, the darker their skin tone. And a woman with dark skin is much more likely to be mistaken for a man. It's not very good then, is it? And there was a quote, about 130 million US adults are already in face recognition databases, she told the AI for Good Summit in, no surprise, Geneva, Switzerland. But the original data sets are mostly white and male, and so biased against darker skin types, she said. There are huge error rates by skin type and gender. So let's look at that statement again. 130 million face recognition are in the database that are mostly male and white, but the report stated it's biased against darker skin. Really? Nice doublespeak programming language that. This whole system is biased against most people regardless of colour. So why even turn it into a colour-based issue? Despite all these glitches and being biased against one or the other or not, it didn't stop those concerns stopping the tech giant Amazon selling its Recognition FR tool to police forces right across the US. You know what happens next. People are going to be misidentified. They've already told you it doesn't work. Childhood, the period in life when others chart your life for you. Parents are there to protect and save you and guide you. Teachers corral you into learning stuff, not much of which has any real value. And adults are charting your path because you are just a child. Adulthood, the period in life when you chart your own course. You protect, save, pay for, and determine your own path with your rules and conditions, not by parents or teachers. Which is it to be? What is your path? Now, in age terms, you are all adults, but are you living in an adult-based life structure? It matters not which age you are. If you are allowing others to chart your life and path, you will always stay in the childhood section of life. If you are unwilling to learn anything beyond what you were taught in school or college, you will remain in a child's level of development, frightened of making your own choices, having little to no trust of others, but more importantly, yourself. Frightened of change, riddled in fear, begging for the system to look after and save you. These people are not adults. They are children who have never had the courage to develop, mired in saviour programs and stuck in a cycle of fear and insecurity. And the question was asked, which one are you? The role of the cell is often overlooked in life, seen as it's small and is not viewable or external. But cells play an important role in life, and yet is barely recognised as such. And it can be looked at as a microcosm to the macrocosm. It is how life starts, is it not? And so it should carry far more importance than it currently receives. but it can also be seen as a lesson to us all and a symbolic meaning of what is life and anti-life, what is evolution or devolution. With many people, and it became a popular program for the Portal people this year, of playing the divide and conquer games, and some even in our own group at this time. We had a lot of fun and games with clowns around the midsummer. Whether they recognise it as such remains to be seen, depending on whether that is corrected or not. How many times have we seen something started off as a good cause, only for one or two to hijack it and then take it off on a different path? That is more about the self than the all. All too common. And it's why the elites or the elites laugh at us. These people, like Cassandra, seem to think we cannot work as a team. It's always about promoting the self, which in part is down to the programming, but indicative of a complete lack of inner work to address that programming. But life starts off with just one cell. That cell then replicates itself and becomes 2, which then becomes 4, then 8, then 16, and so on. And that is evolution and life, whereby it increases the capacity in expansion of itself. Cells don't divide themselves and become less, do they? Those that divide and conquer are in essence devolution and anti-life in a cell complex perspective. And it's something for the people to ponder on. There was lots of people going off or wanting to go off in different side ventures and side groups, and let's split this group and let's divide this and that. No. That was what that piece was referencing. Mnuchin was pushing for a 99-year renewal of the Federal Reserve in July. And no, that's not happening either. And what they were hoping was, because everything was in turmoil, we will just relent our stance over them. No, that's not happening. The Federal Reserve is spent and everyone knows it, Mr. Mnuchin. So why have they done this? Because they all realise now they're being pushed out of their own game. This is a multi-billionaire game now, with the Draco offspawn Rothschilds pulling the strings. As I said in the Clowns in Panic show, the old guard is being dismantled by them as well. And millions of people will get cast aside, particularly in the military, the agencies and the banking circles. It's called, what do they call it? Decentralization. All in your face. Well, they can't say we didn't warn them. Kim told them all extensively they would get swatted aside. And that's what the Libra and all the decentralization is all about. The US military will get replaced by NATO. And they'll just drop them. The agency goons will be replaced by the private security agencies being set up currently by Robert David Steele. Open source, remember? Public intelligence. No, intelligence on the public is what that means. Then we did a piece, what is energy? And how do we view it and interpret it? It is a key thing in understanding life on a much deeper level. Too many just take it for granted, a bit like the cells piece mentioned earlier. Energy can be both positive and negative, but also neutral. And it's the neutral aspect that people need to engage. Why? because it's not yet formed. And so can be transmuted and manifested into something more positive. A lot of the New Age shit, which was highly damaging on an energy level, too few understand it and how it works. Grounding, crystals, stones, amulets, all riddled with energy. And yet how many stop and think, is this object laced with negative energies from the previous holders? Or the region it came from? And the answer is largely no. People assume it is great and vibrant because the marketeers who sold it to you told you so. These crystals give you this or that energy, they say. But how many crystals or stones come with a warning to clear them of the previous energy before you use them? None. And therein lies the problem. People assume they are good and ready to use because someone else with no knowledge or awareness has told them so. Now, Chloe had just done an evening with Thomas and mentioned an incident of how I had helped a member of CV with an entity that was pushing his wife over and causing all kinds of issues. And her main issue was her husband. I'm sure older members will attest to that. But in particular, this particular agent had travelled the world and had been to many of the historical sites like Chichen Itza, Tibet, and various other so-called spiritual places. And along the way collected trinkets from these various sites. And he had quite a collection in his front room, which I told him about, and he freaked out as to how I knew that. But those trinkets carried lots of negative energy and pulled in the negative spirits, although his excessive drinking habits pulled in a lot more. Because he thought that they were all from spiritual sites, he assumed the objects from there would be spiritual also. Like I have said, that New Age program did far more damage than people realise. We must never assume anything. You investigate it, explore all the possibilities of it, and then come to your own conclusions. This is what future thinking brings to the table. This is my action. Now, what are the consequences of such? Like yoga, it can be very therapeutic, but I had to make people aware of the issues surrounding it, as the so-called experts will not tell you that. It's not entirely their fault, as that info or information is rarely revealed to the public. But any pulling in or drawing off of energy has to be assessed first. And the same applies to crystals and stones, praying, tai chi, massages, healing, etc. We're not told of these things, and it has been costly, that lack of knowledge. The same applies to sexual engagement. In new relationships or one-off encounters, you are not just sleeping with one person. You are engaging the energies of who they slept with previously, unless it's over 7 years. Grounding is another thing that's overlooked. Why assume all ground is beneficial? Mother Earth is infected in various places, is she not? What if it was a former burial ground in the past? Imagine the trauma energy surrounding it. And these things have to be considered before you engage in that practice. There's been wars all over this planet, and the soil has been poisoned with all sorts. Dark spirits, negative energy people have all trampled over it before it, have they not? And yet you assume that ground is beneficial to you. It only becomes beneficial when you prepare and create that space. And people often ask, what can I do? Do people think, well, what if I decide here on forward that every step that I make is clearing the dark energies of before? Ponder on that for a second. The answer is likely no, you haven't, because people don't think deep enough or accept the responsibility of being the change. And once you really think on a deeper level and remove the lack of belief in yourselves, there's no end to what you can do to change the world. Only your own self-imposed limitation and distraction programs stifles that. We overlook energy trails and frequency remnants far too easily. So the object of me saying this is to get people to think, not just assume. Clear your field and shield before engaging anything that draws on or engages energy. Certain events were still in July, I think, that took place in early June the 3rd, memory serves me correctly, that those that took part in it were hoping it would change things on a much grander scale than the few can imagine. Those have been hinted at in different shows, and we were hoping the culmination of those events would all converge into a complete reversal of certain aspects here and chart a new path for the organic human souls and other beings here. Now the changes were felt, and we smiled. But Kim got a message a week or so later that confirmed many things, and it was being held back for about a month for certain other things to unfold, reveal, or were operational. And this is what you will hear now. June 13th. All the timelines have now converged. This is the beginning of the new time. Pure time, unaltered by the past. Approximately 5:01 p.m. EST on that day, the convergence was complete. There will no longer be memory of the other timelines as you go forward. Changes takes place only in the present. Evil beings trapped in the dimensional planes will be absorbed by the nothing and go forth into the darkness. Your strength will come from the knowingness that this is the new dawning of a new day. This is similar to your judgment day you have in your books. Do not be surprised to see many human lives fall away. This is because they were not human souls to begin with, but merely a mirror from another plane or point in time. As each layer falls away, there will be a new sense of understanding amongst the general population of Earth. Congratulations, since the dawn of creation, there has not been such unity in the oneness of all. We are proud to welcome you to the dawning of the new age, one full of possibilities of the Creator. Once again in an ever-expanding universe no longer stifled by the darkness we have felt for eons. King Anu has passed on as a direct result of his misdeeds in this universe. Earth will no longer be plagued by this insidious race of beings. His passing would have been around 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time that particular day. The Mantid Queen has thrown down her arms, all 8 of them, in favour of a peaceful alliance with the Universal Council. You too will feel this change as the shift becomes more apparent throughout the days. As the rightful heir to the throne granted by our Creator in his infinite wisdom, the king shall not rise again, but instead a queen will take his place to ensure no more suffering for his children. This is the word of Source, the creator of the oneness that binds us all. You will see the sword of truth cut through all that has bound us as slaves. In time, all will reveal itself unto you. Lead the charge, do not waver. We know the journey has been long, but your unwavering faith has led you and in turn us to this point. Thank you for having the faith in us. Your leadership forward will be most welcome and critical. The probationary period is over and the council welcomes you as a full member of the leadership committee. Now, we ended last night's show with a warning to Anu in May. And Anu, the Draco reptile king known as the Lord in the Bible, yes, you heard that right, never heeded that warning and was subsequently taken out permanently following a request made by us to the council. And then we got a report on a visitation. And the Draco Empire has a new leader after Anu was discarded and dealt with. The new leader is a queen and is currently displaying many characteristics of peace and harmony, which has not gone down well with the Draco minions here. It's quite different on their homeworld. And I said at the time, whilst we at this stage can't fully trust what she's saying, the energetics of this being is vastly different to the previous incumbent and augurs well should that stance continue. And I, for one, welcome it as an opportunity to enhance the plan I put forward 5 years ago of us all working together. Trust has to be built on both sides over time. Anu promised to help in 2015 and went the opposite way. And one hopes that she took up the suggestion I made to appoint the ambassador for her people on this planet currently as requested and ensure the ambassador is not interfered with in any way and able to do the work unhindered by entities under the former regime. To date, that has not taken place. Now, she does have support of 75 to 80% of their homeworld who grew tired of Anu, their family antics and wars, and wished to seek a new way based on cooperation and common goals to be achieved between the two species. She is being supported by the council, and we look forward to sharing ideas with her that, unlike ideas that were shared with Anu and promises were made and subsequently were never followed through with them, maybe this one will be able to garner a mutual trust between the two species. and my advice to her was just don't meet up with agency or military clans. Those groups are not representatives of we the people and have done far more harm than good. In fact, those people sold us out in the 1950s. Hello, Mr. Eisenhower and his offspring. We had mentioned we're not interested in fancy technology that can be weaponized like almost every previous piece of tech that was reintroduced to us. This time we want solutions to stop the fighting, harvesting and blocking the development of not only those two species but many others as well. We'll be back shortly. Hi all, and we're going to carry on into July of this year. And we had the latest instalment of the Mueller saga, now 2.5 years on, and still no mass arrests or actual evidence of all these thousands of indictments, just chatter and more chatter with zero actions of any sort of substance. The country is bankrupt and they all argue over who is more corrupt than the other. I would say the people deserve better, but the majority are either not interested or just participating in arguing over this circus act called American politics. Then Microsoft announced in the middle of July that their NASDAQ platform is now transferring to Excel. Oops. I guess their Oracle system was turned into bacon and went sizzle, sizzle. There was a headline this week from the Portal People, which is the mainstream media for new listeners, was Iran, those nasty Iranians again, is squirreling away millions of barrels of oil in storage tanks in Chinese ports. Avoiding a breach, it said, of the US sanctions whilst providing its biggest buyer with a ready supply of crude to tap into if supply is disrupted or sanctions are lifted. However, Iran has continued to ship large amounts of crude oil to China where they are being placed in bonded storage, according to people familiar with Chinese ports. This was the mainstream media spin to cover stuff that was revealed in our show, both in last night's and earlier. And it's not the first time this year that they did that, and it wasn't the last either. The tiny man and the tiny show goes far, it seems. And the background to this is you'll find that it is the Black Dragon and the Kuomintang groups and their theft out of Iran and Iraq that went to China, and also the Bush family-based refinery in Houston, Texas. That has now been blocked. So they used their propaganda to label Iran to try and convince Trump and others via John Bolton and Mike Pompeo that they must attack Iran so they can steal all the oil again. And then I gave a warning. In the near future, I suspect it will eventually break. A plethora of so-called famous people's names off the internet and out in the main public arena. Virtually every so-called star of TV or stage is involved in it. Every model agency implicated. Politicians, volumes of them in every country. the music industry, large numbers of top stars from the 1960s onwards, it seems, are all involved in pedophilia. The list will sicken many as their favourite TV stars are outed and implicated. But there is a sinister backdrop to all of this that must not go unnoticed or unrecognised. The roles of certain agencies, namely Mossad and the CIA, along with Tavistock and other so-called institutes. Is it institute or institution? Upon investigations on my own sources, those two are implicated heavily in these what I would largely describe as honeypot exercises. I refuse to believe, under normal circumstances, this level of people are involved as pedophiles. It just doesn't compute to logic, reason, or whatever. And that many of them have undergone MKUltra programming, which is the CIA mind control techniques, and then they use the Operation Mockingbird, which is a joint CIA and Mossad operation of control the media, to cover it up and honeypot people, many of whom were on drugs, funny enough supplied by the same CIA. There was a lot of political issues going on in July, and some of the solutions that I've put forward in this show have been heard at the top end, and I was asked to continue. And so we did this solutions piece, and it went to Mr. Trump. And it was suggested by this host only that we would have to close down all American borders, no one in, no one out, for a set time period whilst operations are being carried out. Cancel all global trade deals, including the stock markets, as this will prevent transfers and further looting out of the country whilst clean-up takes place. Cancel the UN, NATO and any other commissions or think tank groups operating under deceit to the public. Issue executive orders to reassemble the military, police and National Guard under America dictates, not US. Can all be done under the Emergency War Powers Act, and instruct them to go and arrest all the top-end criminals in one sweep. Send in a task force team to take over all media outlets, throw out the agency script readers and replace with people who will deliver real news and broadcasts approved by the President, with a series of shows detailing what has and is going on. Remove all corporate and conglomerate advertising off the TV to avoid further lobbying attempt takeovers. Allow total access to entrepreneur media outlets not connected to current mainstream media projects. News to not be based on propaganda or agency-backed scripts. The police to be brought back under the control of the government, not private security holders like Citadel or Vice. Take over Citadel, Vice, G4S and all the other so-called private security groups, as all work for the Rothschilds cult. An executive order to cancel operations of all troops fighting abroad, arrange their return and use them to defend America and its borders, or employ them to go after all these dark forces, people globally, on the condition other countries request help to do so, which is a must. Trust in America is in short supply, Otherwise, it will look like another of the clown invasion tactics, again, which we have much trust globally to regain. This would be a start. Restore the organic constitution and delete all the core-pirate versions. Restore the Bill of Rights. Delete the Patriot Act and restore an American government which we have not had since 1871. Remove all references to United States. This country is not the US. The US is a European power structure created by the Dark Forces. Go to all AIPAC and other Israel-conducive offices, remove all people or contents, and freeze their bank accounts or sequester those funds for the operations and close them all down. Find out who the top-end contributors were and freeze their accounts until investigations are completed. Go into the Federal Reserve building, throw them all out and take over the operations in connection with the Manor World Holding Trust. The lower-end people working in there can be used for the investigations and operations within that building. Issue a new American currency backed by the assets contained within the trust and our own borders, with no references to the United States, notes or other debt instruments to be placed on the new money. No more 10% costs per dollar, saving the country a massive amount each year. Go into the IRS building, throw out all top CEOs and management and take over their operations, implement the new tax structure already worked on and handed over previously to you to implement. Take all funds collected illegally out of the IRS and give it back to the people in the form of rebates. All new taxes will only go to America, not the Crown or other Rothschild slush fund accounts. Go into the US Treasury and the AU Treasury plus other shell treasuries and remove all top CEOs and management and take over all operations in connection with the Manor World Holding Trust. Lower-end people in there can stay in their jobs and help with the investigations within the building. Eliminating several shell companies and treasuries will have a huge savings on government spending. Go into the UN building and close it down until further notice. It can be used to notify the rest of the world of what is going on with real people talking common sense, not puppets on a string repeating scripted narratives and agendas. The Manor World Holding Trust has 6 seats in the UN Council. Go into Silicon Valley, strip it all down, and never allow one consortium to run that type of project with no oversight, which is an actual national security issue, and deal with the clowns connected to the CIA and NSA in that industry. Close down GoOgle and Microsoft, 2 giant clown conglomerates that has cheated, lied, spied and looted this country beyond all reason. We have other solutions to not require either of them, and they are ready to roll out also. The last 2 items will create more jobs and eliminate flagrant national security issues. Cancel all foreign aid, all grants to charities until they clean up their act also. All of them are vulture capitalists, harvesting funds off people under false pretenses. Lower-end people can carry on doing the real work within those organisations of helping people and animals. Currently, they are only helping themselves at the top end. How can you say you are a charity worker and claim $300,000 to $1 million a year in paychecks? No, you're just self-serving, greedy bastards is your correct term. This will also save huge amounts of funds that can be used elsewhere for better purposes. the Clinton Foundation being a prime example of that. Go into the FBI, CIA, DHS and NSA and rout out anti-American and anti-life peoples. Scale down agencies, as most are only spying on the American public, and the NSA can be eliminated entirely as it's just a sub-office of the GCHQ and Crown operations. Staff not immersed in Clown operations can be diverted into many new jobs, investigating each department for misappropriation and also Clown operations. This again will save huge amounts of wasted public funds. Create a task force and go into every so-called research centre, assess all projects and experiments going on in those facilities, remove clowns weaponising anything against the public. All research for the future must be for the benefit of all people, living beings, plant life and the planet only. Eliminate permanently the rest. This will also save huge amounts of wasted public funds. We must quickly set up manufacturing and agriculture with the goal of the country becoming self-sustaining with no imports forthcoming due to the cancelled trade deals. We have much of that already to roll out. As other countries follow suit of cleaning out all of their filth, we can reintroduce trade deals, travel, currency exchanges and partnerships with those countries as appropriate. Where will those funds come from? Well, a country will have massive savings with no Federal Reserve alone, and the announcement of the elimination of their alleged debt, as it's all been paid. No interest payments per day will make a start. Great savings will be made on government spending as each department is overhauled using the staff within those organisations. There has already been massive savings in government spending due to the blocking of over half of the funds given to the Pentagon each year that used to go out the back door. Finally, the Trust has stated it will fund this country until it becomes self-sufficient, which it is estimated to be 3 to 5 years. With the restructuring of the tax money will go to America and Americans, not the Crown and the Rothschilds. We have the assets and the wherewithal to change this country and subsequently the world towards a better path. Then Mr. Trump was complaining at this time repeatedly about biased coverage, and that hasn't changed, and fake news. And we put forward another solution. Is it not time it was addressed once and for all? We have the solutions to fix that, Mr. Trump. 1. Sue them for slander. You know their funds are dwindling. 2. Find loopholes in the 1934 Telecommunications Act. I found several in scanning that document recently. 3. Declare them as a terrorist organisation, which essentially they are under the Patriot Act, and remove their licences. 4. Ban them from all rallies and speeches. 5. It's up to the people to create a nationwide movement and never watch their channels again. And I'm sure there will be a backlash as clown operators behind the scenes will shout dictator, fascist, Nazi if he does that. Oh wait, they already do that now. So there'll be no backlash. This was from an ancient tablet. And we put a portion of it out. Bear in mind that I'd warned about people being on mountains. earlier, and they studied why the volcanoes weren't belching the much needed atmospheric gases and thus not releasing any warmth into the atmosphere. Things were getting worse. Nibiru's problem was to be solved by getting gold to repair the atmosphere and or to blast the volcanoes with nuclear weapons, or he could decide to do nothing. Let with weapons of terror the bowels of Nibiru be cut open. Let volcanoes again erupt, he then commanded. With weapons of terror, skyborne chariots were armed with terror missiles from the sky where volcanoes struck. The mountains swayed, the valleys shuddered as great brilliances with thunder exploded. Now, this was taken from the Nibiru Anunnaki tablets of life on their planet. And it can tell us much about our own planet. 1. It was they who introduced nuclear weapons here. They who used it on their own planet to try and waken dormant volcanoes. And it seems by this that it is the volcanoes that create a planet's atmosphere, which then creates the rain. Which is correct. What one can deduce from that is, as I have covered in previous shows, that the northern and southern lights are not coming from the sky sun, but the central sun in the middle of a planet, as above, so below, which heats up the inner core and drives the volcano fires. This must have been failing on the Nibiru planet for whatever reason, and so the cycle of life started to die off. Now, what I do know is the Anunnaki were stealing or taken by force what I would call the source pack out of the core of planets and the suns, and they were dying off until the technology to do that was removed from them in 2014. So what happens when the volcanoes don't go off? Well, the planet begins to shrink and shrivel up due to no expansion of the hardened rock that came out of the volcano. If a planet shrinks, it then becomes a hollowed out planetoid and subsequently resembles a moon. And we ask the question, is it possible our moon was once Nibiru? Our current moon is too large to be a natural moon, and it has a course of nature, and it as a course of nature cannot be in a fixed stationary orbit with only one side showing, which means it's a fixed satellite station only facing one way. And it's a bit like cable TV. The cable TV always faces Earth to produce the signal. It doesn't spin and go and face outer space, otherwise you would lose the signal. And this fixed stationary object in our sky is the same thing. Hollowed out planetoid. And was placed there, not crashed into the Earth, and was created out of the debris. Because if that was the case, why are the moon rock samples older than the Earth? Oops. Of course, they came here for the monatomic gold to reseed their planet's atmosphere, but it could also be the case that they mined too much gold on their own planet, given that gold is a planet's ballast, which then sent Nibiru on its elongated orbit. Perhaps there's a reason why many of our volcanoes are going off now, and why I warned to stay off mountains recently. Expansion. Timelines fixed does not mean you or we have won. Winning is not an end goal. Winning is doing the right things on a daily basis in accordance with cosmic and natural law under the Golden Rule principle. Developing the self is winning. Addressing your core issues of inner and shadow work is winning. Caring and sharing is winning. Service to others is winning. Being an example of change is winning. Overcoming fears is winning. Being yourself is also winning. Making your voice heard is winning. You are the voice. Use it.